and our panel.
Hello. Come on out, everybody. We have a great panel here. Excited to welcome to the stage Allen Stevenson III. A visionary XR and AI futurist known as the Bob Ross of the metaverse. Love it. I've been calling him Eight Eyes with all the apparatus on.
Yeah.
And then next we have Adrian Rashad Driscoll, award-winning director, filmmaker, VR AR consultant, and co-founder of Collimation. And then we have young Guru. He's a multi-platinum and Grammy award-winning engineer. Excellent. He's highly respected in the music industry for his work in sound engineering, and he's been affiliated with several prominent artists and producers, including Jay-Z, Alicia Keys, and more. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Excited to have you all. So we're going to start off by showing some of the work, because we don't want to just talk about what's being created in XR. We want to actually experience it with everybody here in the room. So Allen, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so sure thing. I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the first slide here, if it works.
Resume workout.
There they are. So these are little concept videos I make. I usually shoot them with glasses like this, and then kind of like, these are all video effects, not true AR, but they help kind of inspire a conversation around what is possible, what could be built. So I often think of like tying it with fitness, and then sharing these videos online. Another example, if I can go to the next slide. Same idea, I try to imagine like a world where you have fitness in the world. What if you had to go and collect crystals that were along a hiking path? And when you're confused, you have like a little AI assistant who can help inspire you and motivate you when you're on your run. Let's say you see all the crystals that you gotta get, but then all of a sudden you're really curious about this flower that you've never seen. How cool would it be if that same AI, you could just ask it a question and it could teach you about the natural world? And then, kind of moving forward, you can collect things at the end of the day, flip it into currency. Go to the next slide. And then, just imagine achievements in 3D. If you've made a hike or something, and you did your workout 7 out of 7 days in a row, awesome, you get like a little reward. Imagine seeing that in your AR experience. Next slide. And then also for like health, I try to imagine if you did something like this with with nutrition. So imagine your glasses could scan an item and let you know whether it's safe or not to consume based off of your own dietary restrictions. So the whole goal here is to inspire developers. I can't code at all, but the idea is if you can inspire the right developers, then they can make a really cool future.
I love it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, here you go. Keep going.
Great.
All right, so if it works.
Nice.
So this right here was, of course, the Rhapsody experience that a lot of you guys know about. A story we tell often is for Rhapsody, this was for CES, right? We built this whole world out, and Rhapsody's like, that's cool. you remember that conversation? So I'm offended. I'm like, yo, what do you mean that's cool, right? And she's like, I don't like sci-fi. I'm like, what do you like? So this is basically the product of us translating her thoughts into an environment, and now people can party inside of that artist's head, right? So one of the main things is you want to tell the story the way it's meant to be told, and it's never going to be plug and play.
Right.
It's never been plug and play.
I think that's one of the great things that we do, and we had that experience of what we thought we wanted to do for this Rhapsody experience. If anybody doesn't know, Rhapsody is an artist signed to my label Jamila along with Ninth Wonder underneath the Rock Nation. And when we made this, as Adrian said, not to repeat, but we were off the mark from what she wanted. So it's really that reminder of sitting down with the client. And then she just started to just describe things. She was like, well, what if it felt like a Brooklyn block party?
Right.
And they were like, well, what are the things that you're into? Well, I'm into basketball, and I like art, and I like this and that. So it's just us taking the pieces of art that she may like, putting them on the wall, but at this time it was a big thing. We're like, oh, if anybody likes the art, then you can buy it through whatever
Right.
you want. Us having the ability to say, if you want to pay cash, if you want to pay in Bitcoin, if you want to pay in whatever, and
nice.
just being able to do those things while you're in the experience. It was also a huge learning experience for us because we had way more people than we thought, so we had to open up multiple rooms. And it was also a great experience for us because this originally was in alt space. I mean, RIP to alt space, but
everybody feels.
then it was a very direct question of things of when I talked to Adrian of, okay, how many platforms can we put this on?
Right.
We need to make sure that we are, again, meeting people where they are because we are the content creators, so we're not asking you to purchase a whole new system. We're going to meet you with whatever system that you're using. I think that's a big part of it and something that we learned a lot from this Rhapsody experience.
Absolutely. And we'll move on to the next thing, which is, so this is our comedy club. Okay, we got the music on too. So what we did is our thought was, how do I extend a comedy club's lifespan, right? How do you have a performer on set that gets to perform once? Well, now what we've done is we've taken that performer off the stage, we've made them into a hologram of sorts, and now they get to continue to perform forever, right? But now you can, and you'll see at the end of it, now you can throw tomatoes and you can decide, doing things that you really shouldn't do in a real comedy club, right? But there were so many options and opportunities there. Now it's of more value to the artist.
Absolutely.
And that's the hard part, giving actual value to the artist.
And again, we sort of thought of this initial during COVID when we were like, okay, well, what are some of the things that we can supplement for people that their income came from them actually going to a venue?
Right.
And obviously comedy was a big thing. And then it also led us to start thinking outside of just comedy, and we were like, okay, well, wow, if we can do any venue, what happens if we can automatically just start putting new rock bands in CBGBs, or something like that to that nature, something that's nostalgic for people. So that's really where this idea came from. But it's not just the building of it, it's actually then saying, okay, well, we have to figure out how many events are we going to do, and what comedians, and all those things. So it's almost like running an actual club.
Right, it really is. And so our next one is us examining one of the more difficult narratives, right? So this is a project that's just announced that we're doing with the Unknown Project, Idea X Lab, and Mindwise. Shout out to Caitlin if she's here.
Right there.
Hey. But what we're doing is we're using volumetric capture and augmented reality to tell difficult stories. How do I talk to you about the transatlantic slave trade without you feeling like I'm yelling at you and saying, oh, you're bad? No, like, how do I talk to you from a place of compassion, right? And a lens that you can understand more, right? And still have some wonder and awe, which, Caitlin's famous for saying. So it's finding the narrative and really expanding that across whatever platform. And there's no plug-and-play solution.
Yeah. I think those experiences, again, come from us having just real conversation. One of the initial things when Adrian and I got together and I first put on a headset and I watched this thing called Driving While Black, I believe. Traveling While Black. And it just blew my mind in terms of when you're on that bus and you're looking around and you get to feel what it felt like to travel in one of those buses when someone's saying to you, oh, my grandmother couldn't go to the bathroom for 5 hours, and being in that situation. Or, Adrian, this is not a joking matter, but I'm like, all the time, my generation, I'm 50, so people will go, oh, if I was during that time, I would have did this and I would have did that. And it's just like, now you're on this bus and you're like, where were you going to do that? Like, if people came for you right now, where are you going to run? What are you, this experience of being able to look around and like, okay, there's miles of cornfields both ways. That's what we're doing with this experience, is sort of putting you in that uncomfortable position of what does it feel like to lay somewhere on a ship and cross an ocean.
Right.
It's a huge thing.
Wow. Really impactful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this panel's about the immersion, the audio, the visual, how you seamlessly blend them all together, and you all just showed such rich, impactful experiences. So thank you first for sharing. Thank you for doing the work, and thank you for sharing these with us all here today. So let's talk about, kind of go back and speak about whichever examples you want. Where does some of the creativity come from? What in these experiences makes it makes them stories that you want to tell in the immersive experience?
I guess one of the first things, I'm always a problem solver, and I look at things and say, what can be done with this thing? I have the experience of being on a bunch of, again, I'm the audio, I guess, portion of this, and we're talking about sound and immersive. But I've gone through enough experience of mixing, with just 2 speakers. I'm old enough that quad was trying to be introduced at a given time, and that failed, and we can see why that failed for our customers. And then to be on another cusp with surround sound. So one of the big things for me was, okay, when I first put on and look at experiences, and I say, how do I tell a story when people can look anywhere?
Right.
So that audio part of it is the thing that will attract people's attention. In that same experience that I was talking about, it's a scene in Ben's Chili Bowl where the riots are going on at that given moment, and you may be looking at some of the historic stuff that they have on the walls, and then you hear something hit against the glass. You may not be looking at it, but as soon as that impact comes and you turn around, and then you see there's a whole scene outside going on that you can't see the full thing. You just see bodies sort of hitting up against the glass, and you hear it. So the sound of it, the impact of it directs the eye of the person watching. Obviously, the basic tools of screams, if it's a horror film or some sort of thing, video game or something like that. But those are the key things that we start to think about. We think about where spatial is and what we're asking when we're trying to correct what's wrong with spatial. And again, having the experience too many times, I think people think that this thing just comes out of the box perfect. And it's just like, no, that's not how technology works. And we have to figure out what things we want, what things we don't want, what things seem real, what things are possible at given times. One of my dreams for audio now is that now that we sort of have this 360 spatial thing, it's still not full body. Right. It's really about the head. So I can direct you, on this level, but something as simple as like your cat, passing your feet without you even looking at it, just the purring of a cat. We still don't have that depth, knowing it's this far, it's that far, it's that far. That sort of thing is something that I want to see corrected, worked on.
Have you been building in mixed reality as well?
I'm sorry?
Have you built in mixed reality where you would have that? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, I always kind of look for hope in the kind of experiences I want to show, because there's an endless amount of sadness and anger that you can show online, and so I feel like there's an open opportunity if you have a hopeful story to share, and then I just try to look at the integration, could AR mixed with that thing be positive? It's I try to do the opposite of that show, Black Mirror. Right. Because Black Mirror, it's always humans, technology, it's the worst relationship. Worst relationship. And that's their whole thing. So I always just try to do humans, technology, healthier relationship. And then make content around those hopeful ideas, just to spark the conversation and get people thinking, oh, actually what would happen if we had that? I know it's kind of hard to get people to put on a headset, and get them to experience things. So I used to build things in AR and VR, and then I would say, okay, put on this headset. But then they have to learn the controls and the UI, and they're okay, well, where do I look with my eyes to control it? And so I figured instead of just making the experiences interactable at first, I make them as 2D videos first. So these are non-interactive, non-programmable. It's just video, no different than VFX or CGI. Put it in a form factor that people are already scrolling through, and then they get exposure to this immersive concept. But it's in a 2D form factor. And then the hope is inspire a few developers who see that, and then they're oh my God, I could build that. Then it's sweet, now you go take it and do the programming and build it out, choose what, platform it's gonna be on, what device it's gonna use, what peripherals. That's kind of how I approach looking at the storytelling.
And mine is so fundamental. I'm look, what is the story we're trying to tell? What I'm seeing in so much of this industry is so many technologists are trying to tell stories. Technology doesn't matter. It never has mattered. I'm sorry. The only fundamental truth, thank you. The only fundamental truth is narrative, right? So I even hate the term creative technologist, because that says technologist is the the bass. No, I'm a tech savvy creative. It's a big difference. So understanding the story you're trying to tell is going to let you know the mediums in which to put it in, whether it even needs to be in VR, whether you need space, because this costs a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort. So if 8 people are going to see it, take them on a field trip. You know, and save yourself a bag. And I think that approach is very rare, unfortunately, because people are like, here's the new headset. I don't care about your headset. You know, that's the truth of it. For me.
It's also, again, I bring in this side of it when I'm speaking to Adrian and we're about to talk to a client, and I'm like, you have to really understand when we walk in here, this person's going to ask us these basic questions. What is this? Why do I need it? And how does this help me? Right. And of course, the ultimate question, how much does it cost? Right. So that's the thing that you have to realize, that me as a music engineer, a lot of people have no idea of what I do. They don't care about compression. They just care about, does my song sound good?
That's it.
And I'm actually paying you to do that part. If I wanted to do that part, I would have went to engineering school.
Right.
So the client really wants to know the basic bottom line, and the easier that you make it for them, and really the easier that you make it for the user experience, whoever they are, that's the thing that's going to continuously bring people back to you. You know, of course, we're not skipping over mastering technology. We're saying that you have to be that buffer in between to say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and sometimes you don't need to do.
Right. Absolutely.
What if, when you're having those conversations, what have you found becomes most compelling to the clients that you're talking to?
Great question.
That's a great question.
The most compelling thing for me is trying to, I guess it's compelling on my side, is trying to convince them why they need it when we're still in a marketplace where it's not readily available to everyone. So if they're looking at, you have to understand that, especially in the art world, everything is changing right now. These artists are literally week by week being told by their record label or by someone else, the algorithm switched and now we're on to reels and you need to concentrate on this. Traditional marketing in the music business just does not work anymore, right? To go put up a billboard thing, it just doesn't work anymore. So it's almost to the point where you're looking at people and going, okay, no one's a social media expert? Because this is just weird that it changes so much. So for my clients, and then we're on top of this newness that they're feeling, we're trying to pitch them something else where they're like, oh, you need glasses for this. Okay, well, how many people, they'll just start looking up numbers. How many people in the world have those? How many different versions are there? How much am I spending? So those sort of questions, when we prepped on how good the technology was, how good our experience is, and then they just flipped the whole conversation. So that's been the biggest learning experience for me, I guess, is figuring out the sales pitch on something that we already know is really good. For someone who has no clue or no understanding, and really almost to a certain degree, you're trying to convert new people into the church.
Do you put them back into the experience that you found so compelling, that traveling while black?
I do, but I start with the bottom line of how they can make money while they're asleep. That's just the basic bottom thing of here. Here's how this thing is going to help you gain more fans, make more money, get more revenue, like how this all trickles down. Then I start showing those experiences. Then I start saying, okay, well, this is an emerging technology. It'll be here in 3 months or 4 months, or Adrian and I just went to go see this incredible new 3D thing, you know, that's out where you can stand in front of it and project things around you, not like old 3D, where, you know, if you project it on top of it, that thing would be on, you know, showing our clients, and we literally bring people to all these things, but that's the biggest part is, and I hate to sound like that, but it's really to them, if you're in this quick thing, this is how this helps you make money in the organization.
The bottom line.
Can I challenge that a little bit? So like, I think it is important to show them how they can make money, because that's like what they care about. But I've also found that if you can say that what you make for them can inspire their teams, then they bring you on in like a more consulting, advising capacity, and it allows their researchers to still do the research. And they don't, I just noticed it turns their I guess the iteration makes it shorter. So like, or it makes it longer. So if they wanted the returns on that investment, when it's like a product, they want to return right now. But if you're saying this could be really helpful for your researchers, your development team, your managers, then it's like a delayed gratification. They're actually more willing for that to be something that maybe over the next couple of years we can build it up.
Depending on your company, depending on if what you're talking about is company-wide versus a specific client where you're doing a client-by-client basis. So if it's something where I'm going to Columbia Records and I'm saying, hey, this is something that I can present, right? The same way, if people aren't aware, even today, Universal just signed a deal with a specific company that I'm not going to name, but to allow all of their artists to basically make copies of their voice.
Yes.
Right? That's company-wide. Versus Adrian and myself and me going, hey, we have a Beyonce pitch today. This is where we're going in. We're going to talk to Beyonce about why she needs this.
But what's the difference there?
The difference there is that I'm convincing her versus convincing
It's
the
an artist
longevity of a
versus
whole
the
company.
executives, right? It's like an artist about if there's something that they want for their legacy or for their the way that they would connect with the fans versus talking to an executive suite that then have to then pitch it to like artist by artist.
But I want to make the point that what you're saying makes sense. That if that's your lane or your angle of saying, okay, this company, I can come in, I can consult, I can tell you what these things are. You can have a team that sort of builds it, does all these sort of things. We do it in that way as well, but we're a lot more direct with specific artists because I don't even take the chance of, this is my position and I'm lucky, but I don't even take the chance of speaking to an A&R or to that person. I go directly to the artist because my experience says that it gets filtered down by the time it comes to the artist from, higher up.
Now they want it. Now they know what they want.
Absolutely.
And to both of your points, I think it's amazing to be able to have a piece that can live longer because everyone's doing one-offs. And it's like, okay, cool, this is going to last for 6 months.
Right.
And then what? Instead of having a piece of IP that can end up being a TV show later, that can end up being this, and being able to extend the content, I think is a magic in and of itself.
Yeah.
So we talked, we dug into the sound part a bit, and I want to come back and talk to you about what you just mentioned that you said you weren't going to talk about, but we're gonna loop back to that. Let's talk now a bit more about the visuals, and how you think about integrating it all together for the immersive experience, and you talked a bit about the Rhapsody example, but let's dig into that a little bit more and some of the other examples, and how the visual world comes to life.
For me, I always start off with accessibility. So whenever I'm trying to design something visual, I just try to imagine, could you experience it without sight? Okay, yes, no. All right, how could I help? Could you experience it without sound?
Right.
Could you experience it, like I have chronic nerve damage on my left half. I have limited use of my left limb. So like a lot of stuff that I develop, I try to imagine, could I actually use this without being in too much pain?
Right.
So like using your own kind of barometer and then design visuals first from that accessibility standpoint, as much as you can. Not everything's accessible, but like I see like these jumps and coming up. And then when you build that way, then it also, I find it makes it harder for people to tear it down. Because I used to not have a good defense, to be honest. When I would make something that I thought was cool, they'll be like, well, that's just dumb. I'm like, oh. Spent a lot of time on that thing. Don't really appreciate
and not
that.
very smart comment though.
Yeah, but you know what happens? But I found that I'm able to kind of shut them up more when I'm like, oh, well, I have limited use of my limb, and this actually helps me having voice controls. And then they're like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool.
And I used to be so gung-ho about it has to be photorealistic. Remember, we used to talk about all the time, and Cos and Christy know this sadly, because like, it has to look realer. And now I'm realizing it doesn't. Because once you set the tone, like Richie's plank experience does not look photorealistic, but you're not stepping off that plank. And it's an old experience, but you're not stepping off it because your mind has said, look, I accept this to be the reality. And it doesn't matter if it's high fidelity, if it's a Nerf, a Gaussian splat, whatever, or if it's very stylized. Your mind has accepted it. So lean into that. Hey, it's not photorealistic, but it feels like this. You know your character, lean into it. Why not?
We did. It's easy to explain why that was the initial thing of going for this photorealistic thing, because it's like, oh, I want to look exactly like reality. It's sort of the same mistake, and everything becomes music to me, and we're not going back to music, but it's like when we first made synths, our thing was, does this sound like a piano? Does it sound like a clav? And it's just like, No, it's a synth. You know,
Right.
it's a whole different thing. But the goal of judging how good it was how good could it emulate something in real life.
Right.
So it was like, you know, then we get switched on Bach, and it's just like, oh, this can do a whole bunch of
Right.
other stuff that the reality can't do. So I'm a big comic book nerd, and comics go through phases of people trying to draw the human anatomy exactly the way it is. Then an artist might get tired of that and do these elongated sort of things on purpose, and you know, there's all these styles. So it really will boil down to your art and your artistic style, and then what art fits a specific project of what you're doing.
Right.
So I think that's a huge thing. But we were, at least I was stuck on that, and I was big on Adrian. I was just playing Ghost of Tsushima, and I'm like, everything has to look like this. It's just like, this is how good it is. You know, I want this in real time. The sun and everything.
With the
The way,
photorealism.
when I step on the snow, it keeps my footprint. I want all of that.
Right.
And Adrian's like, okay, yeah, we don't have a supercomputer. So it's like,
Coming
and
soon,
we have to
coming
put that.
soon.
We have to put that to be able to
Right.
be processed on that.
Right.
So you know, it's that balance of real life and what you can do.
Just to add to that, like, I know like at DreamWorks, everyone was so scared of doing like stylized animation because they didn't have any proof of concepts of that paying the bills.
Right.
So like everyone in DreamWorks was so happy when Spider-Man did so well for Sony.
Yeah.
That gave all the artists permission to be like, actually, we're gonna pitch a story that looks more hand-drawn.
Right.
And now that the main funding engine could see that made money, they're like, oh, yes, we'll invest in a stylized thing.
Right.
It doesn't have to have that CG look anymore.
Right.
So like, I think the more times that we as XR developers, creators can like point to, mediums that were successful financially, that cover a wider array of stylization, not just the photorealistic, not just the stylized.
Right.
Then we can be like, oh, well, Spider-Verse did it, and that worked like this, and we're gonna make a thing that has line art on top of our 3D,
Right.
and you're gonna love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the ability to walk through that experience. So imagine when it's living. And when I say living, meaning just, when that story that we love comes to life and we can walk through it and not just look at it panel by panel. That's going to be a huge, huge thing.
Absolutely.
Especially at this rate. I mean, I feel like we're gonna be living with like characters from our childhood or new IPs that we make up that basically embody our environments, maybe are persistent, and have long-term and short-term memory. I mean, how fun would it be?
All of that affects the creative and what you're going to do stylistically. Or you said Lionheart. It was it's amazing. I watched the writer, and she was being very specific about the changing of hair. She was like, well, Black women don't wear their hair the same every week. So yes, this character's hair is going to change, and all of those things are stylistic choices of how you do certain things.
Yeah.
I always had purple hair in all space.
Right.
R.I.P. again, but to my purple hair. So let's talk a bit about the role of generative AI in what you're creating. You mentioned, a deal that just happened in the music industry, but let's talk about, one, I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have on that. How that will impact sound, and then in general, how are you using generative AI in your work?
Can I jump in as the amateur here? Where I say amateur, it was really me and Adrian getting together, him teaching me so much stuff over COVID, and I was like, I'm so interested in this. For us to be at this point where I can jump on Leonardo, and I'm not shouting out any company, but that's what I use, and what I can come up with, I'm like, oh, I'm scared for anyone who gets really, really, really good at this. That it's almost too good.
Yeah.
And me as just a basic user of what I'm figuring out with generating just any image that I can think of in any style, mixing and matching them. The price point is amazing, and the team price point is amazing.
Right.
So it's just like those tools now, we have to start thinking about them the same way we thought about every other industry, where I studied photography and I learned film and I learned pushing and pulling, and now that doesn't really matter because everybody has this iPhone, and that lens is probably better than the camera that I've had. There are generative music now, and we would, search for all these records from the 70s and the 80s to sample for hip hop music. I'd literally go on a website and I go, okay, make me a 70s sounding world music, and it's giving me something brand new. And all of that is changing, you know, what our
And then you're using it, what you just made?
I'm saying,
Are you using what you just
oh,
made?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's one of those things where you have to see that coming up, where it's like, okay, if this is my job and what I do, how am I going to be that much better than just the common person, or is my job even going to be there? So that's one of the just main tools of, I can sit and I can make an idea, pass it to him, and then say, code this and make it look this way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, everyone's afraid, it seems, of generative AI, and I understand why. But like, it's not gonna leave, you know? So now it's like, how do we regulate? How do we be smart about it? But overall, this is a great tool. I use it in my workflows all the time. I get to key out things and I don't have to go and try to fine tune and use Borf. This is great, right? But there are gonna be people who misuse it. There are gonna be people who, you know, have a villainous thought in their head. But most people, once they understand this, it's gonna affect their life and make it better, in my opinion. It's not sentient, it's not gonna take over the world like everyone thinks, but we're so fear-based, that's what we put first. Oh, the monster is gonna be Godzilla. It's not. You know, this is a program on a computer, is what this is. So to utilize and understand that it's here, let's use it, is gonna be to everyone's benefit, in my opinion.
I mean, I kind of mixed feelings on generative AI. My first 2 weeks were like, I was like, I'm done. Like, it can make stuff that would have taken me forever, and it does it better than what I would have done. And I was like, all right, I'm done. You know, that's it. And I think I spent 2 weeks having like an existential crisis with my wife. We were both like very visual artists, and I think we were using DALL-E 2 at the time, which is not even that high of quality by today's standards. And we were sitting there like, oh my God, we're toast. And then after 2 weeks, we kind of like went out in nature, we walked around a bit, got our bearings back. And then I was like, I bet I could use it to like amplify what I love about creating things.
Right.
And I started to experiment with how could it be an amplifier versus just the replacer of me. Then once that was clear, then I was like, okay, I'm gonna be.
You switched the way you framed it. You
A
reframed
whole
the whole
framing change.
Yeah, you reframed it.
And now I sprinkle generative AI into everything I do. So, you know, in the 3D world, I'm using it to kind of start off my rough concepts. Maybe I'll start off in like an image generator, get that idea, and be like, does this look like the vision I want to spend time 3D modeling, rendering, rigging, animating, lighting?
Yes, I can give my client 5 different options before I get to that
Yes.
point.
I even make them like sign off this image, and I'm not moving forward until all the people say this is good. Cool, they've confirmed this. Then I generate more AI images.
Right. I'm sorry, but you hit a nail. Obviously, people in the room for this, but we've done that a bunch of times where you're like at step 8, and then they're like, we really liked option B. Oh, God.
Can it be blue? No, it cannot be blue. Man, can we make it underwater? Like just the whole experience, but underwater now.
The one thing I will say is that, again, having the experience of, okay, so what if these 5 people have gone and studied at the greatest schools and they all can play the same instrument, what makes this person more successful than this person?
Right.
It boils down to taste. All art is taste. So once we have the same tools, it's like, okay, now your taste comes into play. What do you really like, and what taste do you have that will appeal to everyone else? It really comes down to that.
And how you define successful too.
Yeah.
So I know you were one of the early artists with Sora.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us a little bit about that experience?
I'll only share what I see publicly stated about it.
Please only share what you see publicly stated.
Cool. Yeah, for the record. That tool is pretty interesting because you can take an idea and it'll generate video, and it'll be like photorealistic video. So similar idea. A lot of people who's, you know, if you're the end point of a process, if that was your job, then it's like terrifying. So what I'm seeing on like my end is like there might be a death of specialization and like a birth of generalization. So specialists that I know in like the VFX world, they didn't like that. They're like, uh-oh, that's problematic. It can do all the stuff that you would normally get in the VFX pipeline. But then my generalist friends, they freaking love that idea. They're like, oh my God, I could go in so many different directions with this now. So it's like, you know, if you're in a specialist, a good measure would be like, if you could like write down on a piece of paper what you do and like the task that you do. You can explain it all on a piece of paper and you could hand it to somebody else and they could do that. That's a problem.
That's a problem, right?
It shouldn't be this easy to explain what you do. Like, you know, my hope for people like to not be specialists would be make it so that what you do cannot be personified on that little piece of paper, and it can't be handed off very easily without like a lot of friction.
Yeah.
But
Good news for all of us who can't explain what we do.
perfect. Yeah, it's a golden era for us. Yeah.
It's also, I mean, I would say, having been in this industry for many years, because it's so many different industries coming together, where you have storytellers and people coming from engineering and gaming and animation and mental health and
Right.
different parts of enterprise. So many of us in this industry have had to have a more sort of generalist approach to work in this industry. So in some ways, it's good news for many of us.
Yeah, XR is super general.
Yeah,
I mean, I've noticed like
it
you
is.
can't just be in games, you can't just be in graphics, you can't just be in story.
Exactly.
It's already an intersection, so it's like it lends itself quite well.
Very well, absolutely.
The next generation doesn't view it, I guess, the way that I was raised, and you do this one thing. So all of my students who are creative, no matter what they do multiple things.
Yeah.
They make
Right.
music, they also do their own videos, they also
Right,
do their own
right.
social
Yeah.
media, they also do their own art, they make clothes, they do everything, you know, where it's not just this one discipline. So, you know, again, it's the person who wants to be a film director, but then now says, okay, I don't have to go out and rent a studio to do my score. I can do it all in my house.
Yeah.
You know, or I may bring a friend over who is very proficient at playing piano, can express my feelings, but we don't have to rent a studio to do this.
Right.
So those you can apply that to every aspect of just life. So the general is already here for our next generation.
Absolutely.
All right, so sadly, we're running out of time.
Oh,
I know, this is a great conversation. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about is, for people in the audience, what's the best way for them to follow up with you or get in touch with you? And is there anything in particular that you would like people to talk to you about? You know, are you hiring? Are you looking for certain type of projects or brands? Or what would you like people to come chat with you about?
chat with me for consulting. If you need someone to consult on futuristic technologies, best reach me through Instagram, Don Allen III.
Chat with us about projects. Let's collaborate. Let's build something. Adrian Rashad Driscoll, always a full name, like a Tribe Called Quest. Say the whole thing. You know, and anything educational. We do a lot with education. Meta, if you're here, let's chat. We've been waiting. Let's do a lot with teaching other people how to create this content.
You can find me at Young Guru 763 on Instagram. Instagram is my main thing. I'm not a big Twitter person, trying to keep my sanity, so DM me on Instagram.
Awesome. I'm at Joanna Popper, and thank you all so much. It's great to have you here. This has been really excellent. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your work, and thank you for doing all this great work.
Thank you all.